Hello, my name is Nancy Young, and welcome to another episode of Your Voice Matters with Nancy Young, a program highlighting the positive voices within our local communities and how they're impacting and uplifting our world one person at a time. Now, before we get started, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. Today, we'll be highlighting your voice through that of a book that we'll look at today called Road Trip by Joel David Trout. My guest today is from San Diego, California. He also hails from Atlanta, Georgia. He will be here to talk to us in depth about this book and how it can relate to your life. Our episode is a bit longer today. We've set aside a little bit more time to delve into this book, so we hope that you enjoy today the episode at this time. Welcome to Joel Trout.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm so excited and grateful to be here with you.
Well, today we have who I call Bishop Joel Trout. He is an author and he is a father. He's a pastor. He has a lot in his background and his repertoire that he can draw on for life. And so today we are talking to him about his newest ebook called Road Trip. And so let's just talk a little bit about who you are as a person. Give me a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm a preacher's kid, grew up in church. My father's a pastor. That's a whole nother subject. That's an hour-long discussion, being a preacher's kid. But
Right.
Grew up in Ohio, so I still claim Buckeye status. Very dedicated sports fan. Moved to Cali in 78. And so growing up in church, obviously being involved, learned how to play instruments, taught myself how to play the organ, and became involved in music, and then just grew in the church as far as involvement, minister, elder, assistant pastor, and then music involvement heavily as a writer, producer, record company owner, and raising 4 children and with 6 grandkids now. But very curious about the world. And so there's pretty much no subject that I can't speak on or I'm not interested in. So that's one trait about me. It's always just been curious about how things work and how things operate. And there was a person that saw me. He said he remembers me at 4 years old, sitting on my mother's lap for 3. And he saw me take apart an ink pen and everything down to the spring and everything. And he was remarking how I put the thing back together. And that's pretty much me. I guess from a child, I've always been interested in how things work, and I'm a pragmatic person. So when I teach, I try to take the complicated and make it simple. And that's the way I look at the world.
Okay, because everything is broken into little pieces. And sometimes you just see the whole, you don't understand really the mechanism, the underlying currents and the things that, that it took to build that. That's interesting, that kind of mind that you have that just represents how you are now. And so the thing is, how long have you been in ministry?
I acknowledged officially my calling. It's probably about 18 years old when I officially began. So I'm 58. So I guess that makes about 40 years of
About 40 years ago.
ministry, and I'm still a young man. It's amazing. Been at it, been working at it.
Okay. Yeah, still a young man. I know 50 used to seem ancient, so I started creeping up on it. And then when I touched it, it's like, oh, heck no, this is not old anymore.
Not at all.
Being in ministry for like 40 years or more now at this point, I'm sure you've preached hundreds, if not thousands, of messages. And so with messages, people can, recall those who were in the audience. If it was recorded, then you do well for other people to be able to hear it again. But now you've moved on to writing. So this is an ebook. And even though I'm really that paper in hand kind of person, I was excited to get my hand around my phone to be able to read Road Trip. So I just want to talk about this one particular thing. So what what actually gave you the passion to actually begin to write books? Because I know that you've written a couple of books, Living Life with No Regrets, and then also, and that's a really good book that I would love to talk about that subject. I haven't read the book, but the subject itself is intriguing to me because many people go through life and they die with regrets, and that's one thing that I know I don't want to do. But as I even read Road Trip, and at the beginning you talk about sometimes people say that life is a trip, and it, whether it's a trip, a journey, or whether it's a trip, things are kind of some kind of special sometimes. But so what inspired you to write this book?
As I said, I've always been inquisitive and tried to look at life from complicated to simple. And in that particular summer, I was going to be in another city ministering for several months, but I wanted to put together a series of messages that had continuity. Oftentimes, ministers preach ad hoc, and we have ad hoc messages all over the place, and there's no connection. But I wanted something that had connectivity where people could really take the hold and really impact their life. And so it occurred to me one day, just being an observer, that the signs on the road were metaphors for spiritual messages. And so I just began to extract from each sign, not all signs, but several signs that I thought had a true message behind them. And so while I was ministering this in Los Angeles, I also gave this assignment to my ministry staff in Atlanta. So I assigned each one of them one of the signs. And I'm preaching on those signs each week. So we had this concurrent thing going in Atlanta and LA, and but each sign we preached on. So the signs on the road I thought were just a perfect way to get across messages. Signs are meant to inform us and instruct us, but cannot necessarily make us do anything. They're signs.
Right.
And so for me, to obey the sign and get the benefit of the sign, or to risk going against the sign and risk what could happen if I didn't follow the signs. So having lived life and looking at life from a drone point of view and looking down, it occurred to me, most of the things that I wanted to blame others for, I could look back and say, you know what, the signs were there and I didn't heed them. And so let me put it together in this form. It started out as messages, but I thought, let me put it in more of a permanent form, because people tend to forget a message, but you can always go back to a book. And that's what caused me to write it down.
Right. So it's almost kind of like writing it down, make the vision plain, make it plain for people to be able to see and to hold on to. Like I said, I'm sure you've preached probably thousands of messages over the course of these, 40 plus years of ministry. And, some things that are really good and it's good for people at that moment, but to be able to reflect back on and see. And for those who weren't there, I know sometimes you're in the service, you'll be like, oh, I wish so-and-so was here. Sometimes it's, because they really need this for real to help out their lives. But for others, it could be really to encourage them as well. And so sometimes you're trying to sit there and recount what was said, but to be able to have something to look back at. So let's kind of like walk through the book a little bit. And so I know years ago I was thinking about signs, and you didn't get into the different signs, whether they're white signs, with the speed limit on it, which is really a command, versus the yellow signs that are suggested. When you're going around curves, we suggest that you go 25 miles an hour. Try going off that R-Front 55 and you're on two wheels trying to, curve around there because you didn't realize it was going to be a sharp turn. You just thought, a loose suggestion for you. But you talked about goal sign. Your first chapter, you talked about, the goal sign, or really is the stop line, or the stop sign, or not the stop sign itself, I'm sorry, but the lights that's red, yellow, and green to go, and why, some people stay and don't go. So what was important to you about that? I mean, I have some notes that I've written down here. The implications of the word go applies when you use in a spiritual platform, just as well as a secular platform. But I'm not going to go and explain that right now. I'll let you just highlight those points.
Well, go was really about getting us off of dead center, and getting motivated. Like, for example, writing this book was a goal sign for me, and I had to commit to it and discipline myself to do it. And so I know from experience that when I'm at a light and someone ahead of me has not gotten the goal sign or they're distracted, it
Mm-hmm.
causes impatience in me. I get fidgety, and eventually I'll go on and honk, or I've been honked at. And we don't realize it, but many times our procrastination, hesitancy, or distraction can actually impact other people. Our lack of moving when it's time to go, there's a window there that if you don't move in that window, you're going to miss an opportunity many times. It's not that opportunity hasn't come our way, it's just that we didn't go in the time of the opportunity. So we have to remember there's a time for every opportunity. And not to do so ends up making you have to stay where you are, because now the lights change and it's too late for you to jump out. Now you've missed a cycle. And
Right.
in the book, I talked about a period of time when I never forget going down this long road in Atlanta. It's called 85. And I mean, it seems like about 5 miles, but it's a stretch of just lights. And there have been times when I actually made every single light. And I'm talking probably about 10 to 15 lights. But the timing was just right for me to make every single light. And I described that moment when it's time to go. What also will happen for you is that opportunities will come, favor will come when it's time to go. And so I was trying to get people to understand it's time to move, whether it's the book, whether it's the business, whether it's running for office, go, just go. Because there's wonderful things that happen when you go. And then there's
Right.
so many spiritual ways of connecting that too.
I know you talked about some of the reasons why some people don't go. One of the things I thought about, I don't know, I'm always in an editing mode, so I'm always thinking, oh, I could add this to it. I was thinking just because last week as I was going down the street and I'm trying to hurry to get someplace, and it's like two cars in front of me, they weren't moving. But then all of a sudden they put on their hazard lights. And so I'm like, there's a problem. There's a problem with that vehicle. And I was able to pull out and go around before I missed the lights. So,
Wow.
sometimes other people are in your way. Some people because it's something broke down in front of them. And so some people hinder our go. Some people hinder our lives. So in that spiritual context, how would you say? What would you encourage people to do?
So if you look at it from a spiritual context, everybody is at a different place, and sometimes we don't always appreciate that, uh, and don't realize, especially let's say it's someone who we admire, someone who may even have been a mentor. But what can happen is that they can project their fears on you and cause you to stop when it's really your time to go. And so we have to be careful that one person's hazard doesn't become my hazard, as it was in the case. It's funny you say that, because I was coming up on a situation where traffic was way backed up. I'm talking about real recent. And God forgive me, but I'm gonna tell you something. I was not about to get stuck. I literally veered out of that lane and went the opposite direction on a one-way ramp. But there was no one coming up the ramp at the moment. And I heard and made my way off of that holdup. And in many cases, it's like what the scripture said. Peter said on the day of Pentecost, at the end of his message, he said, save yourself from this untoward generation. So saving yourself may mean they're stopped. You got to keep moving. You've got to keep progressing, even if others have stopped. Sometimes a failure will cause other people to stop, but don't you get mesmerized by that failure. You know, a leader could fail. It just absorbs everyone and it can't move forward. You got, I'm marking the perfect man. I gotta get off here
Right.
because I'm not gonna be stopped by the same thing that stopped everyone else. I've got my own things to deal with besides being hindered by everyone else's distraction.
Right. So because
Go.
some people, I'm stopped, so just stay here and keep me company. And like, no, I got to move on. I got to move on to the next thing myself. So now we're gonna go look at yielding. And so this is a new way. I mean, I've interviewed other authors, but since you only have 6 chapters, I want to just kind of like walk through the book.
What?
So your second one is on yielding, and the good point, I wrote a note here. Good point. Yielding is the pathway to greatness. Yielding segues one from a self-centered life to a life of purpose and destiny. So I wanted to quote you there because yielding, you talked a good thing about yielding, and it's not, and I think that it's probably a good analogy, not just spiritually, but even when it comes to relationships, because people feel like I need to submit, and I always thought when I first got married, submit. Oh God, that was a 4-letter word. What are you talking about? But yielding is a two-way thing, and you talk about that in relation to God too. So give me your insight more on yielding.
You know what? I brought out that there's another aspect of yielding, and it's from the monetary standpoint. Uh, when advisors talk to you about your investment, and if you invest in this particular money market vehicle, then your annual yield will be such and such.
Right.
So they're actually speaking of it from this aspect. If I yield, submit my funds to this vehicle, there's going to be a yield for me. So it's like one yield begets another yield. It's not a dirty word because yielding actually is a power word because you cannot yield something that you don't have control over or that is not equal to or greater in value. So if I yield, I'm actually submitting something that is of equal or greater value. But someone in this moment has to yield. My car weighs as much pounds as the other cars coming through. But for the sake of safety, I'm gonna let you go by because the sign tells me to yield.
Right.
But I could just say, well, nice suggestion, but I'm going through and I'm gonna risk it. And sure enough, boom, the other person has the right of way. I'm requested to yield. It's not a light, but they're saying we strongly suggest that you yield to the car because there's nothing restricting them from coming past here. So I try to present yielding not as a negative thing, but actually there's great reward in yielding and submitting. Uh, I think I brought up about Jacob, how that he fought with the angel. And he said, I will not let you go until you bless me. And he was struck, which caused him to let go. Uh, but his name was changed from the heel grabber and liar and deceiver to Israel, the one that has power with God. because he surrendered, he submitted. And so I don't want people to think that yielding is bad. Like you said, it's just a 4-letter word. I ain't, that's in our mind, we're thinking someone's taking advantage of us. But I like to think this too, that if I know what someone is doing, you're not taking advantage of me. If I know what you're doing, like Jesus said, he was quiet throughout all the Inquisition and all them spitting on him and slapping him. But one thing he did speak out on when Pilate said, "Man, don't you know I have the power to take your life?" And Jesus did speak here. Hold up 1 minute. Let's get this. No, you don't have the power to take my life. Okay? I'm surrendering it.
Yeah.
You see, that's a perfect example of yielding. I have not given up any of my power. I'm using my power to submit or surrender in this moment. But it's not a lack or loss of anything on my part. So I wanted to frame yielding more positively than what we think when we say yield.
Yeah, so it's I mean, as the quote that I had put here as far as the pathway to greatness, and it segues one from a self-centered life to a life of purpose and destiny, because you're intersecting with other people. I mean, we have a lot of roundabouts, and you have to yield. And so I was in a roundabout the other day, but another car started coming through, and I paused. Now I had the right because I was in that roundabout first. For me, but just trying to base on my right, I was about to get hit. And so Nancy gave up her right to yield for safety so that I can continue to go where I was going. And that person gets wherever they was going to. So it's a matter of our destiny sometimes that we do have to pause and that we have to yield. And one time, one of the things you said in there is that while you're yielding one time, somebody else is going to have to yield to you another time. So it's that balance, that give and take.
It's a balance, and like you said, it's a means to greatness. Because guess what? You're able to make your destination,
right?
Because you yielded. And if greatness is in front of me, you won't find anyone that has reached greatness without some point in their life where they had to yield. They had to yield to instructions. Someone had to train. Someone had to teach. I didn't know it all. I had to submit as a student, and I need to be instructed. Or I have to live a yielded life. Some lives are meant just for the sake of humanity. Those are yielded lives. I mean, people have given up great things just to go and serve someone else. I remember during the last Republican convention, the parents of that young girl were talking about their daughter, early 20s, who went over to Turkey to serve over there. And I'm thinking, what's in Turkey? And a friend of hers called her to go over to Syria to help in that war-torn area. And the girl, young, early 20s-year-old girl, crosses the border from Turkey to Syria, proceeds to get picked up and molested and abused. But they were able to get a letter out from her to her parents. And in her letter, she talked about being in the free fall of grace. And it just struck me that, my God, this young girl gave her life up to help others. And in the midst of all of that, she responds that, I'm in the free fall of God's grace. And so I'm hearing about her life being inspired by her. She gave hers up and not realizing that, she's now inspiring a generation of people, all from a yielded life.
Yeah. So that's good. That's good. So now we're going to move on to under construction. So I was reading about your description of hermeneutics, and it's funny because I have my doctorate degree in theology, but I guess they didn't feel I needed hermeneutics because I had been preaching for so many years. So I got to bypass that class. And so, but you're talking about what that means in the first instant of, that is mentioned to build on that. So you're saying on page 23, if this hermeneutic principle is true, then the first mention of the church in scripture is always tied to construction. And so I will build my church. And so it talked about the church not being a finished product. And so, there's a song that somebody made years ago, be patient with me. God is not through with me yet. But when God gets through with me, I shall come forth as pure gold. I remember saying that many times. But but the reality of it is everybody haven't heard that song. People don't pay attention to it and they ignore it and they expect everybody to be perfect. And so, but we really are under construction. So I just wrote down under here the entire chapter, amen, 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 with exclamation marks. The entire chapter was just really inspiring. So under construction, what is the main key thing for you?
Under construction, it really is not meant to encourage weakness or failure, but for the person that's under construction to be patient even with themselves, to recognize that you're still a work in progress, that you have not arrived. And to sometimes we need to be easier on our own selves, because in our mind's eye, we believe I should be at this certain point by now. And that may be very true, but there are things that cause construction delays. And so you have to account for the fact that there are things that cause delay. And then there's people who have expectation of us to have been at a certain place. But when I used the church as a model, he said, I will build my church and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Well, the church is not a building. It is made up of individuals. So watch this example, because in that particular scripture I was referencing was Matthew 16 and 18 and 19. And he was referencing Peter. So Peter said, thou art the Christ, Son of the living God. And Jesus said, flesh and blood is not revealed to you by my Father, which is there. And upon this rock I will build my church. The gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Peter is a perfect example. So after all of this happens, Peter denies Jesus. He curses and says, I don't know the blankety blank man.
Right.
And he abandons Jesus and betrays him. So watch what happens. This is the week of the crucifixion. 50 days later, that same Peter is preaching the first sermon on the day of Pentecost. And I know it's like we forget, wait a minute, it was just 50 days prior that Peter was cussing and saying, I don't know Jesus. And on the day of Pentecost, he's saying, Jesus is Lord. He's the Messiah. He's the Christ. And Peter is a perfect example of how the Lord can construct us and reconstruct us. Peter was totally done in our books. 50 days, most of us, we would set folks down for 50 years, 50 months. Okay. Jesus took 50 days to rebuild Peter. And one of the things he did was when he came back and spent time with them, he said, Peter, do you love me? And he asked him 3 times.
3 times, yeah.
So as to erase the denials that were on record. The 3 denials. The cock, you'll deny me 3 times before the cock crowed. And sure enough, what did Peter do? Deny, deny, deny. And so what did he replace it with? I love you, I love you, I love you. And it just shows you how the work of God is meant to construct and reconstruct. The Bible says we are his building. We are his workmanship. So we are always in process and never arriving. And so it's meant, especially when it says under construction, when you go through construction zone, you have to slow down. The fines are higher if you speed through construction zone because there's people that are more vulnerable under construction that could be hurt more because there's workers around on the freeway working. So it's a very delicate place when someone's under construction. And so I think we need to recognize that you never know when you're going to catch someone, and it might be a real difficult, delicate time in their life when God is really doing some work on them. They might snap at you. They might not respond the way you want them to. But realize, okay, I'm gonna give them that space because they're obviously under some major construction, some major overhaul going on there. Because guess what? As the Bible says, consider yourselves. Because there's been some times when it was like, okay, I don't think there's a beam, there's a two before left in my life. I don't think there's anything left. And the Lord was just doing some major work. In fact, many times there'll be a scaffold up that hides what's really going on.
Right.
And the scaffolding is there to help the workers build this building. But when it's done, you take scaffolding down and then you can see the beauty of what was being done all along. So
right.
I like to quote Psalms 139. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made.
Absolutely. There's actually a building that's been under construction the last couple of years here in Tracy. It's a hotel, Home 2 Suites. And usually when hotels begin, it goes up really quickly. So I'm like, what's taking them so long? But the outside of it now looks beautiful. But what we can't see is what's going on the inside. When they open those doors and we go in, the rooms will be laid out, the beds will be put in, the artwork will be on the walls. And so sometimes, people can see that there's been a change on the outside, but God is doing a much better, magnificent work on the inside. And sometimes people, they want to see that. As I was going through some things, I remember when I was in college, I remember this one lady came up to me and she said, well, you just don't seem remorseful. I'm like, you don't live with me. You don't know my tears when I'm at home. You don't know what I'm going through. When I get to church, I put on, the face like, I'm here now. I can make it. So as God's building me up. And then it was years later, I ran into her and she said, you know what? She said, your strength through that time has really helped me through my hard time now. And I was like, what? Because when she came to me before, it was weakness. But in the rear view mirror, she saw the strength that I had exuded. But God was working on the inside of me. And so, we don't ever know what's all that. And I don't want people to get discouraged from getting your ebooks in that Nancy had covered the whole book here. So I'm going to scroll through just the titles of the next couple of ones because this is going to be a long interview, but I hope everybody stay tuned to see the whole thing. Rest stop ahead. We all need rest stops in life. And so this rest is not to be confused with sleep, is what you had mentioned on there, and just the usefulness of rest stops. And that's important now, even during COVID, because so many restrooms are not open as you try to get something to drink and go eat. That ain't going to work because I tried it. And so, but rest stops are important in life and detours ahead. Let me see. I quoted on page 33. Out of all the possible road trip signs you could possibly encounter, this one, I dare say, causes the most visceral reaction: detour ahead. Because don't nobody want to detour, especially when you're in a hurry somewhere. Then you have a detour sign up. That is all problematic. But I do want to talk about this last chapter. I did quote several things from Detour Ahead. Detour to discover destiny. Is what you say in there. Detour to discover destiny. Sometimes you find the most scenic routes, the most beautiful things where you're on a detour. But the last chapter, roadside assistance. I want to talk about that because I know a lot of people get frustrated and it's really bad if you don't have a roadside assistance card in your car or in your wallet. It's helpful when you can call somebody. They may take forever to get there, but help is on the way. But let's talk about some key things for you in roadside assistance.
Well, it's really needed because in the trip of life, the road trip, one thing is going to appear at some point in time, and that is, I need help. And I use that when I talk to leaders and try to assist them. I say, don't be afraid to use that word help. You'd be surprised how much you free people up who are thinking that there's nothing they could do for you. In actuality, they could be of great help to you. It's a power word, help. And just saying, I need your help. Can you help me with this? Roadside assistance is really saying that at some point in time, there are going to be breakdowns in life. And these are not planned, these are not expected or wanted, but will occur. Some of these are through our own neglect, and some of these things are from outside forces that we have no control over. So just remember, we got all of that working. It's either, I did not put enough gas in, I did not make sure I had enough oil, I didn't check the tires, neglect. And so those are the things that, pain us because we're broke down, and it's many times because of neglect of our own. And we need assistance. And then there's those times when we're fully prepared, we've done everything. I prepared for life, went to college, got the degree, married up, just did all that. And still something invades your life that you had no idea would come. And guess what you're going to need in that moment? You're going to need help. We cannot get out of here. We can't get out of this world without needing assistance along the way. Now we're kind of close in age, but I don't know if you remember on the road years ago, they used to have these yellow boxes on the side of the road where you could actually get out of your car. I know I'm dating myself. Kids are gonna be like, huh? And these yellow boxes had telephones in them.
Right.
And you could call and get help. It was such a welcome sight because we didn't have cell phones, GPS, none of that. And we could get assistance in the middle of nowhere. And it was such a relief to know that you could get help, especially in a barren land. The relief that you felt knowing if I could just get to that phone, I know I could get help. And so I just wanted to encourage people that there is help. As David said, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. But guess where the goodness and mercy is going to come through? It's going to come through people. And the assistance that we need in life is going to come through the very people that many times, same people that we feel like we get all of our hurt and pain from, God's also going to use them to provide assistance for us. Jesus, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, guess what the Bible says? The angels came and ministered to him. Jesus. Right. Jesus carried the cross, and he couldn't bear the cross. And they called Simon of Cyrene to come and bear his cross. I mean, these are messages for us to help us understand that if Jesus, as a Son of Man, needed help, who are we somehow to think that we're going to escape in this life on this road trip without needing assistance?
Right.
And I wanted to encourage people to accept it. Also learn how to accept assistance. Receive it. Don't downplay it. Don't excuse it. Just say thank you. I needed that.
Sometimes people get really frustrated, especially when it's the neglect part, that it's because something that they didn't do and they're stuck on, if I had only done this. And so in other times it's like, but I did it all right, as you said. And life still just happens. And so as far as those call boxes, I'm actually on the safe board. I've been on the safe board out of, it's a part of the SACOG, the Sacramento Council of Governments in Sacramento that I go to monthly. And it's part of the 511 system that we have throughout California now. And it's for those call boxes. I have to actually fight to keep at least half of them up at our county because everybody still doesn't have a cell phone. And sometimes your car breaks down in the middle of the night when you don't have a battery or you have a lot of people in the car, you have an infant or you have a senior or something, and you can't get to that next stop. So I am still an advocate for that even now these days. So it's part of the 511 system. If people go on 511.org, you can still get help. You can still call 511 and get help. And so I've been asking really for them to put up that advertisement so that people know that they can still get that kind of help, even if they don't see a phone. It's like mainly the blue signs now, but they were yellow. But in our segment of town, at least it's 511 up from Sacramento coming down through our county. So that's still there to get help. Caltrans is putting up some of the advertisement signs for people to be able to dial 511 to get that. So, but people do. So we need to call our spiritual 511 help, for the roadside assistance. And so as you and I were talking earlier about that tow service, sometimes it's like it may be a flat tire, they can come and, jack you up, put some air, whatever, change your spare tire on if your tire is ruined or whatever, you just go get it fixed later. And sometimes it's a lot more work that needs to be done. And sometimes you have to be towed off and go into a garage and, be taken offline to be able to get some of those things taken care of. So it's a lot of good news. This whole show is about really highlighting positive voices within our local communities. And so I'm really glad that you've come to talk with me. This is a really long episode today, but we can talk about a lot of things. But even this book real quick about road trip and, just our life being like this road trip. The good news is that there is help. As long as you're here, as long as you're still alive, that you can always make better choices. You can, if you haven't gone, if you're stuck, you can still go, just going from your first chapter all the way down to the last chapter. If you need some assistance or if you need some rest along the way. One of the points that I got when I was going to college, a friend gave me a bookmark and it said, "Don't quit." So, pause if you must, but never quit. And that's what we need to be able to do in life. Sometimes we need to pause. Sometimes we need that rest, but we can't quit. We can't stop. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with us today? We're going to have another episode with Bishop David Trout.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot here. In go, I mentioned this, that there's go in the gospel. The first two letters of the gospel are go. And the gospel meant to give people a message of grace. Like the woman caught in adultery, they brought her to Jesus. Jesus got rid of her accusers. And his first words to her was, "Go." Said no more. Go is in the gospel. That's the good news.
Right.
And then I threw that in. And God's first two letters of the name of God is go. So work that one out. Okay. So there's go in God. How about that? So you can't get around it. So that's what I wanted to start it out with, the whole book. And the whole book is really understanding life is a trip. It's a journey. And it is a trip also. It can trip you out. And I'm telling you, there's been some seasons where I've been tripping on life. And I had to get a hold of myself. You better get back involved in life instead of tripping on it. Right. And I just want everyone to understand we're all on this road together. And we're all learning and gleaning and gathering. We have breakdowns. People drive on the side of the road and they see an accident on the other side and everything slows down on one side because everyone's looking on the other side. And not to get distracted on each one of our individual destinations and paths. So there's so much more that could be added to it. I mean, you've actually given me some fodder for more. And since it's an ebook, I can keep adding to it.
Right. I can give you a whole lot more offline.
Yes,
but one of the last things I wanted to mention that you did mention in the book, and I'm going to paraphrase in a whole nother way, but it's different if you're going down the street because you said that we're all on this road together. And so it's understandable sometimes if you're driving down the street and you see a hoopty, you didn't say hoopty, but if you see a hoopty on the side of the road broke down, you can kind of understand, yeah, that's probably on this last leg. But to see a BMW, a Mercedes, or a Tesla, some upper class car, why is that on the side of the road? And I think sometimes people look at different people in leadership positions and they wonder, why are they on the side of the road? I can understand that hoopty person who was just, on the edge of life, why they broke down. But I don't understand why this top person is broke down. But we're all on the same road, and we all need road service from time to time. And I think when we can do that and we can consider ourselves, because I think sometimes people don't consider themselves to ever be able to be vulnerable. But if you, as Pastor Peterson, who I grew up under, said, keep living, if you keep living, then you will experience some things in this life. But thank God for mercy and grace. As my dad, as a pastor, used to always say, they stalking you. Grace and mercy stalking you. Yeah, following you all the days of your life. So I thank you so much for talking with me today. And I want to make sure that I have that right information for people to be able to get in touch with you and to be able to get that book or any other books that you've written out there.
Well, my website is I Serve Global Leadership Group. And they can order the book right off of the website. And also the website tells about the group that I have. I do a newsletter to leaders, and we're putting together a benefit package of resources for those in leadership, things like a retreat, counseling, crisis counseling, benefits like that for leaders. So I Serve Global Leadership Group.com.
Okay, I wrote .com. I was going to try it out to make sure before I put it up that the .com part works. Okay, so I will put that information up at the end of the episode so people can do that and they can go ahead and get that. I actually had my sister who had bought the ebook just send me a link so I could just click on it and buy it. It was real quick.
She
so
did.
I could have it and start to read it right away. So thank you so much. And then I wish you all the best and maybe your future endeavors in politics. People running for the United States is probably like 100 years old. You still got time.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
You got a lot of time. Comparison.
Don't get me started, believe me.
All right, then. God bless you. And we'll talk soon.
For having me.
All right. You're welcome. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again to Bishop Joel Trout for sharing how your voice is truly making a difference and impacting our world through your latest, most recent ebook called Road Trip. Now, if you've enjoyed this programming today, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. If you would like to get your very own copy today of Road Trip, please see the information on the screen below. You can find other information that will be insightful and helpful to you on that website as well. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of Your Voice Matters with Nancy Young. And remember, until next time, your voice matters. If you have something positive to share and you would like your voice to be highlighted on Your Voice Matters with Nancy Young, please contact me at YVMwithNancy@gmail.com. And if you've enjoyed this programming, please hit the subscribe button right now. Thank you.